Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nic King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox. And together we're here to explore, understand and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course.
Hello, welcome back to Neurotypicals Do Not Juggle Chainsaws with Kate Fox and Nic King. This week we are going to talk about the stuff people say is good for neurodivergent people, but is it?
That's good. It's not the snappiest title we've had, but it's a very good provocation to consider. So, Nic, give me an example of something that people think is good for neurodivergent people.
You see, when I deliver training, particularly at schools, I have this slide that's called the autism shelf, right? And it's this idea that they go, oh, it's the autisms. We'll go get the thing off the autism shelf. And in this image, there's a shelf with a visual timetable, a pair of ear defenders, and a bit of blue tack. Because that is all autistic people need.
Yes.
So no, just no. I mean, maybe people do want blue tack, and maybe people do want ear defenders, and sometimes timetables, visual or otherwise, are quite helpful. But I think it doesn't. It's meant to sort of poke at the loss of the eclectic nature of humanity. Never mind neurodivergent humanity, just of humanity.
Yeah, just of humanity. And so that's interesting because I think often when people generally want to help, but they don't know what to do, there is a security in, but I've got a thing. Here's the thing. So that's making me think about audience packs for neurodivergent people.
Okay.
Which, on the one hand, it feels good that their performance or a conference might hand out a pack.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose what would be in that pack would be typically some little earplugs, a fidget toy,
mm-hmm.
and I think that would be. I mean, I have actually seen a pack handed out, and it was at the Autism and the Arts Festival at the University of Kent in 2017. And the exciting thing was a pack was being handed out.
Yes. When I do sensory bags for organisations, I do some sort of ear protection, normally ear defenders because they're more than one use. Sensory sort of like fidgets and toys, and make sure there's like different things in there. So like a visual one, a touchy one, a chewy one within hygiene reasons, because you've got to think about these things. Ones that sort of like spin. And then sunglasses. I like sunglasses in a sensory pack. And then I did one for a farm that had a mask in it as well, because animals smell.
Animals do smell. They're so smelly.
Yeah.
Mask. I like it. Okay. So we're not disagreeing at all then. In fact, you put that pack together. We're saying, so these are good things then.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
They're not all the things.
They're not all the things. And to a point, those bags need to be not environmentally like, more than one use, but like the farm one needed a face mask in it. The one that we did for the Science Centre didn't, but actually when we talked about them using them in the science labs where they do smelly experiments, then there was a smell element that went into it. So there was absolutely an environmental sort of thing. You've got to consider how much else is going on though, is it? It's not that simple.
No. Well, what I feel is intangibly being given in or with those sensory packs is permission to be neurodivergent. That's the thing we can
space. Yeah.
And it's saying, look, we get that you will have some needs here, and they may or may not be covered by the items in this pack actually. but we understand the needs. Now, of course, being myself often quite literal minded, I might then think these are the only needs I am allowed to express now. Ones be covered by ear defenders, fidget toys, maybe a mask. And actually, I see, that's interesting. I would. I mean, I am in that way quite literal. And then I'd be like, so personally, I'd also be like, I'm not a very good neurodivergent person. And I'm probably not going to use any of these things. I'm doing being neurodivergent wrong.
Oh dear.
So definitely, I would also need maybe perhaps in written or audio form, or maybe even in the bag, in the form of a little note, the permission to do my other neurodivergent things.
What are your neurodivergent things?
Well, see, I am. See, here's an irony. I was going to say, I mean, one of my biggest sensory issue actually is around sound, and at the moment, I am on an ongoing journey of failing to sort out what I need around that. As in, most ear in or on ear things are sensorily uncomfortable for me, and I am looking at trying, but I haven't yet. Trying ear loops. Someone has recommended them to me.
Yeah, or the flare things. I haven't gotten on with either, to be honest. I know loads of people who use them.
Yeah.
But I struggle having things touching my ears. For me, with noise, it's about control. So if I can leave the environment, it actually doesn't really matter how noisy it is, as long as I know I can escape. But then if there's noise like that you can't get away from, so like if one of your neighbours decides to randomly have a rave in the middle of a field, like and you don't know when it's going to stop, and it's like if I don't know when it's going to stop and I am not in control of it,
I am.
It's a problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting one to have for me right now. So my street is usually very quiet, and that's why it works for me very well as a street. The houses 2 doors up are having their roof done. There is scaffolding, and on top of the scaffolding is a little gate, a safety gate, apparently, so that the roofers do not fall off. This is a good thing. However, it's windy and it's been clanging for about a week. Clanging, clang, clang, clang.
Oh.
I have reached the end of my tether now, and I did say to the man from the scaffolders who I just rang, I was like, to be honest, if I wasn't scared of heights, I would by now have scaled your scaffolding, and I myself would have secured the gate shut with a rope. And I actually did.
Yeah.
I went out earlier and I was like, can I? No, I can't.
But the fact that you were at the point where you're considering it.
Yes, and I did. And it's quite a while actually since I've had that sort of. It's like, but I held it in on the phone because I'm doing a lot of Buddhist meditation. So I think we should cover maybe that. Yeah, one of the things that is good for neurodivergent people, but is it? So I've really, it was a rage. Is rage the right word?
I use the phrase visceral anger.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah,
yeah, and
I'm quite a chill person generally, but
yes,
yeah, but no noise. And people stuff change unplanned immediate change, people being late and stuff like that. Visceral rage.
Yeah, and so then that makes me want to ask about. So it is often said, and it will be said more about autistic people than ADHD and other neurodivergencies, but. Okay, so routine. They say that routine is good for autistic people, but is it?
Oh, but then the ADHD and the need for newness and novelty, but then the need for sameness and routine and what? No, yes, but no. Although autistic and obviously self-identify ADHD, we've talked about this, I am probably more routine-based and ritual-based than the rest of my household, who like newness and novelty and change more than I do.
That's interesting. Yeah. And how do you negotiate then?
Badly.
Right.
I think there are things. So like my husband has to sort of, he takes time off at roughly the same periods of every year. We go on holiday at roughly the same periods every year. We go in similar kind of places every year. There's stuff around sort of framing the year, not necessarily a day, not necessarily an hour, but framing the year that gives me security. And because that's often like really high dopamine hitting things, like going on holiday, they're like, that's cool. Or on board with it.
That's really interesting. And do you think you at some point earlier in your life kind of needed more of a day-to-day or week-to-week routine security and have kind of adapted it and now have it on a bigger time frame of a year? Or were you always able to work on kind of a year? I suppose in school you have that frame of the year, which is quite consistent for over a time.
I think obviously we've talked about my neurodivergent upbringing household. So I can remember going to like friends' houses and I'm like, what time's tea? And they're like, oh, when it's ready. And I'm like, what? Hang on, what? Like, what? Tea is 5:30. It's still 5:30.
Yes, I bet that's deeply embedded. That'll be too deeply embedded to really.
Yeah, like there's a training course that I deliver for the NHS where lunch is like the whole day is structured and the breaks are structured, but that the lunch break is an hour later than I normally have lunch. So I have lunch in the 15-minute break before the lunch break because I can't eat that late.
No. And it can't do it. I've at various points in my life kind of lived with and encountered or been aware of, people who are more autistic than me, and then they have provided a routine. So it might be an ex who, definitely tea was at 6, or my mum, she was at 4:30 when we got home from school. My stepmom, not autistic, I don't think, more sort of post-trauma, but her whole life, her week was a routine as to what you ate and when. I know that's, that was quite common for people in, I'm going to say, the olden days, wasn't it? But then if I am untethered by those people like you, actually, then meals is a bit like,
I am hungry.
It's 2:00 at night. I appear to have not had tea. What's gone on there? Oh, I must eat before I go to bed, but something that's not going to keep me awake. So it's interesting. I become a satellite. Aware of time now, actually, and to go back to something else that we just touched on then, because I said about Buddhist meditation. So, meditation. Do people say anyway that meditation is good for neurodivergent?
I think particularly because obviously there's parent carer spaces that I'm in and they're like, let's breathe and light the candle. And I'm like, what do you mean you want me to stay still? Like, can we chat about how uncomfortable that is going to be for me? Because I do not stay still.
No. And see that if it wasn't that it was really expensive, I would have gone on it. There was a mindful meditation for, or kind of with neurodivergent people course offered by a particular institute that I really rate for what they do and how they do it. And I was like, I wonder what accommodations and adjustments they make, because it does feel like it would be really important to let people know that they could move. And actually, this particular institution, in fact, has walking meditation as one of its things. And I feel like that was probably to accommodate originally all the monks going, flipping it, do we have to sit down for another 4 hours? Oh, okay, it's okay, everyone. We'll do walking meditation. We've not invented autism and ADHD yet, but we feel you. Whereas a lot of meditation practices, don't accommodate that. However, if you asked me what is the single most useful thing that I have encountered personally in the last couple of years for my particular brain, it would be meditation, because of the detachment from my ever swirling, ruminating, looping, busy thoughts. They're still there. It's not like I've stilled them. I thought that meditation was about trying to completely still your thoughts. I thought that's never going to happen, but it's about allowing distance. So let's say for some neurodivergent people, maybe. What else?
Isn't that sort of like the full point, though, that it's individual, that we all, we have individual needs, that we have individual preferences, that nothing works for everyone. And that's, that's how it is. Everyone has different sensory needs and physical needs. Like you're talking about going for walks. I quite like a walk, but I'm also hypermobile. And there is a point where too much walking is just painful. Like over the wrong terrain it just hurts. And then you sort of, that's not necessarily helpful for co-occurring conditions and things that are going on there. Then there's more dangerous things that people say are good for autistic people. Not so much in this country, but social skills training and
yes. Can we talk about that? Because I've never, so growing up as a late diagnosed adult, it was never on the agenda for me, never something I've had to encounter, and it's just tangentially been available in spaces where I have been, and I've gone, ooh, heck, ooh.
Yeah, that face where you go, ooh.
Yeah, that seems clearly awful. So can you tell us a bit about what it is?
Yeah.
And then why it is, well, I think even without, many autistic people would say that permutations of it are harmful and traumatic, but why? So yeah, first, what is it?
I mean, social skills training is essentially attempting to teach you another language, in that they are, attempting to teach you how to communicate with the neuro majority. That's what you used the other week with the neurotypicals. Having never taught them how to communicate with you, because the problem's all on the autistic person, right? Or not. And this can be a lot of like turn taking and doing listening in a very sort of non-authentic way. It can be, I thought for autistic people, can be a lot of like introducing scripting around small talk. Lots of things. And I think, oh, yeah, the ooh bit, it's just, it's about making somebody else comfortable and not necessarily the neurodivergent person. It's all sort of put onto them.
And are we getting as far as ABA, advanced?
I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen in this country. I'm just saying that it happens less here than other places in the world. But like in America, when I speak to my license holders in America, they talk about really, really tiny people, like 3-year-olds, being in like 40 hours therapy a week, which is just crazy.
See, and we know at quite a visceral level how not okay that is. And yet, in the mainstream, there is still a belief or understanding that autism is something that should be cured, and if not cured, then mitigated.
Oof.
And we're like, whoa, because feel.
The thing is, you still see it, and there's some awful things, and there's some awful things that I don't even want to even really talk about today. But like, just even something, I think if you Googled it, maybe fairly high up that Google list would be something like a gluten-free diet.
Okay.
There's no evidence behind that, but like,
no.
But the thing is, if you are naturally, because obviously you can be autistic and you can be very, very sensitive in terms of allergies, and maybe a gluten-free diet actually stops your gut being inflamed, which you might not be able to properly feel or explain. And then there is a consequence in that your perceived behavior in a small person is better, or that your perceived feelings about yourself, if you're an adult, feels better. But that isn't autism and isn't neurodivergence. It's a co-occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea that, again, it's back to, if we just change and adjust this thing about the autistic person, then they will behave more like us.
Yeah.
and the premise and basis of that is so very wrong, and yet still often the main premise and basis of things that are said to be good for neurodivergent people. So yes, I mean, I know for me personally, obviously, I feel better. Let's say maybe it's got more veg and fruit and
Yes.
less bacon and fewer pastries. Oh, how sad! And less chocolate in it. I imagine that diet would be better for me because it would probably be better for everyone.
Yes.
Not just me as a neuro, but actually, what's better for me as a neurodivergent person, the ADHD part of me. Have you heard of the concept of the girl dinner?
No.
Yeah. So it's it's not a new thing. So I think this comes from America. Maybe it's on TikTok a lot. The youth have it. A girl dinner being something a dinner that you pick at. So it's got, bits of carrot sticks and hummus.
Oh, like a picnic tea. I would call that a picnic tea.
A picnic tea, or and I think also in the northeast, picky tea.
Picky tea. Yeah.
But actually, what that also is, I would say, for me, it's enabled me to kind of guilt-free manage to have a really easy meal without cooking, without any processes. It's essentially taking things out of the fridge and putting them on a plate. And some of the things are even vegetables
and proteins.
So this is definitely a thing that is, I think, good for, because executive functioning is something that many of us struggle with. Things that make life easier.
But it's also clearly bringing you joy as well.
Yeah, yes, it is.
And that's always a good thing.
It's always a good thing. Do you know what I find is maybe something that's a danger in the discourse of, is this thing a good thing? And then the conclusion of, even though I said that I thought we were going to conclude this, the conclusion of, well, it's different for every different person. There must be a middle ground though, mustn't there? Because the autism shelf with the ear defenders and the blue tack and hoping that that's going to solve everything.
No.
That's not great. But also, there really are some things that will tend to be quite useful for many neurodivergent people. And I suppose I worry that sometimes people will use, oh, well, when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, potentially, true as that is, as a way to then go, well, you can't do anything, can you? Because it's like all different. I mean, everyone's different. There's a million things. So we'll do no things. And actually, there are some things that might not work for everybody, but in fact might generally have some benefit. So so as an example, kind of looking at diet and food and doing it with that neurodivergent lens, and kind of what's going to work for you with your particular needs, and probably therefore looking at eating habits, food and diet in some way quite consciously. I'm going to put my neck out there. Put my neck out there? That's not right, is it? Put my neck on the line and say that, I mean, it's useful for everyone. Okay, I'm just contradicting myself now, but it's useful for everyone, but it's definitely useful for neurodivergent people. It's useful to have that conscious, okay, how's this working for you? What's going on here? Is there anything that needs adjusting?
I think there's possibly something in that sort of like that mean, that average, that there is a place that can work for most. Do you know what I mean? And then if you're at that place, it's easier to diverge from that place than a place away from that sort of that mean, that sort of that average, that sort of like comfort area. It's easier to move from there than move from somewhere that's, significantly further away from that. If we're at the autism shelf, at least we're sort of looking at the shelf. Or if we're standing with the sensory bag, at least we seem that we're open to the conversation and we're open to listening and we're open to advocacy and, without judgment. hopefully.
Yes.
Maybe.
And that is the single thing that is right and useful and necessary for all neurodivergent people, actually. We could almost finish there, but we would be finishing 5 minutes early. We can't do that. That's very inconsistent. I mean,
No.
very exciting for, some people who are like, whoa, there's an episode that's shorter. That's novel, and it's a shorter one. I'll listen to that first. But for those who like routine and consistency, I do think the world of podcasting probably requires consistency. I think, 29, 30 minutes is where we should be at. So in these final 4 minutes, what else is good for neurodivergent people?
I would like everyone to have a really good idea of their sensory system. I would love all young people to have a really good idea of the sensory system. And I don't think that necessarily always takes an occupational therapist and a sensory report. I think if you can get one, awesome. But I'm also very aware that, that's not necessarily true. I think conversations with autistic people about different sort of communication, sort of like maybe different kinds of speech therapy, good salt in young people. But it's all about sort of this, it comes back to self-understanding every time, isn't it? That if you know what's good for yourself and you're in a safe enough place to advocate for yourself, you're mostly the way there.
I mean, I'm thinking of, and this example has just floated into my head and I can't think where it's come from now, so I can't cite it. But there was a household that I read of or heard of where the autistic child was able to, whenever he needed to speak, he'd made up a kind of alien language with burbles and squawks, and it was based on what an alien would do. And it was his something that he really needed to do when sensorily overwhelmed, but was also a communication mode. And yeah, I think was soothing, self-soothing too. So had many benefits. And actually, so that was just a coping strategy in the house that he did. And I can think of so many families still and always who would just be like, "Oi, stop burbling like
yeah,
anyone any good. Don't do that." And actually, he had found a brilliant multi-purpose coping strategy that worked really well for him, actually. And
we all communicate in different ways with different people. You're far less likely to swear in front of your granny than I am on this podcast. We all behave in different ways in different environments. And we all need different things out of different environments.
Yeah, one day we'll talk about the cat language of the autistic, particularly girls.
Yes, I know so many kittens.
Yes,
I do.
Yeah,
they're fabulous.
They are, and it's almost it's like not a meme of communication, is it? It feels like it's quite naturally occurring that if you are.
And it's also it's about that third party, isn't it? Are you meowing back, or are you judging the human cat in front of you?
Yeah, generally, of course. Well, for me anyway.
I'm always meowing back.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Clearly, you meow back. Although apparently, not everyone
knows
meows back, and that's what we need. A world where because that requires maybe more empathy or understanding than a lot of people are just able to have as they go about their day. But actually, the idea that we would communicate with people in the language they are subtly or unsubtly signalling to us works for them as best as we possibly can.
Yes. And maybe there's another podcast there. Maybe there's about different cultural languages in autism.
Aha! Yes.
Maybe there is. Maybe we should talk more about meowing at each other in the next one.
Indeed. But until then, I think we can only sign off with a meow.
Meow. Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nic King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk or visit our website, neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk, to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.